So throughout chapter 14, we've talked a lot about the structure of the autonomic nervous system as it relates to the peripheral nervous system. But if you remember, we talked about how the peripheral nervous system is associated with your central nervous system, and ultimately we can say that the ANS is actually under the control of your central nervous system. So the major autonomic centers of your CNS are your brainstem and spinal cord, as well as the hypothalamus and the cerebral cortex. We think of the hypothalamus as like the main integrative center of your autonomic nervous system because it contains a lot of nuclei that regulate things like blood pressure, heart rate, your ability to thermoregulate, sleep-wake cycles, a lot of emotional and visceral responses to emotion. So cerebral input can modify your autonomic nervous system, but it does so in a subconscious way. And it works through the limbic system and structures on the hypothalamic centers because we talked about how there are, the hypothalamus mediates the visceral responses to emotions and odors. So we can think about the cerebral cortex as being like the higher brain center, conscious centers. Now we know that consciousness relates to emotional inputs via your limbic system, and these associate with the hypothalamus. And we said the hypothalamus as the boss or the major control center of your autonomic nervous system, since it is what relates to the limbic system, emotional inputs can change our basically visceral responses. This is mediated through both the brainstem and spinal cord. So your brainstem, like the reticular formation and other nuclei, can regulate things like pupil size, heart rate, blood pressure, airflow, salivation, different types of reflexes. And these are actually under the control of your hypothalamus in some regard. And your spinal cord is also involved with different reflexes, like for urination, defecation, erection, and ejaculation. Now, what's interesting is when we talk about people with spinal cord injury, if you sever the brain from the rest of the spinal cord, these reflexes will still work. However, they won't be under the control of your brainstem and hypothalamus. So people with quadriplegia can have a condition where their spinal autonomic visceral reflexes are out of control, where they might just urinate abnormally or defecate or have an erection abnormally, and or have difficulty with any of these as well, because this part of the spinal cord actually can't communicate with the rest of the brain. Now, it's important to note that many autonomic functions are on the subconscious level. So we talk about the spinal cord and brainstem as being subconscious control. But the hypothalamus, because it relates to the limbic system, emotionally you can change how your autonomic nervous system functions. So people who meditate can lower their blood pressure, but this is through an indirect way because conscious thoughts can change your emotional state, which can therefore change the types of sympathetic or parasympathetic outputs that occur as a result.